The cheetah wasn't supposed to stop. Not on live television, not in front of millions, but the moment he stepped into the studio lights, his head snapped toward the anchor desk. His ears pricked, his chest tightened. And then he made a sound no wild predator should ever make for a stranger. A high, trembling chirp, the kind reserved for a mother, a bond, a memory. The host froze mid-sentence. Viewers leaned closer to their screens. And before anyone understood what was happening, the cheetah was already running straight toward her. What happened next would break open 5 years of silence and expose a secret no one on Earth was prepared to see. The lights in Studio B of the Johannesburg Convention Center were too bright for anyone to look entirely real. Everything on that stage seemed slightly polished, slightly softened. The gleam of the curved desk, the blue and gold backdrop with the global Wild Aid Telethon logo, the technicians moving like ghosts just out of frame. It was the kind of light that could make war zones look tidy and grief look tasteful. Maya Collins knew how to exist in that kind of light. She stood on the smaller side stage, the one reserved for heart segments between celebrity performances and donation tallies, and let the makeup, the blazer, and the wireless mic do their jobs. Her posture was good, her hands still, her voice steady as she spoke into the main camera. "Tonight," she said, "we're telling the stories behind the numbers, not just populations and percentages, but the individual lives that hang in the balance when we talk about conservation." Her vowels carried a soft Texas lilt that monitors in the control room had flagged as warm and trustworthy years ago. It was the voice viewers in the States had come to recognize from daytime health segments and late-night interviews about burnout and resilience. Here, halfway around the world, it was being used for something that felt, to Maya, more dangerous than any discussion of cholesterol or insomnia. She could feel the weight of the telethon around her. Off to the left, in the main arena, a South African pop star was getting ready for a performance that would cut in after this segment. Behind her, a massive LED screen cycled through slow-motion shots of elephants at sunset and rhinos trotting through dust. Somewhere in the dark beyond the stage lights, hundreds of donors, celebrities, and conservation workers watched from their tables, glasses of sparkling water and wine catching the glow. "And sometimes," Maya continued, the prompter scrolling smoothly in front of her, "saving a species comes down to saving just one life. One animal. One moment when someone chooses not to turn away." She didn't glance toward the wings. She had trained herself not to, but the knowledge sat just behind her ribs. Somewhere backstage, there was a crate on wheels and a handler in a khaki shirt, and inside that crate was a cheetah. Not just any cheetah, at least that was what everyone kept saying. The most reliable ambassador animal in the Sanjaro Wildlife Rescue Network. Calm under pressure, comfortable in human spaces. A consummate professional, if such a phrase could apply to a predator designed to run down antelope at 70 miles an hour. Maya knew better than to anthropomorphize. She knew the scientific literature, had interviewed enough ethologists to recite their caveats in her sleep. She had repeated their cautions on air herself. But tonight, every rational explanation felt like tissue paper over a crack in the earth. She was aware of her heart in a way she hadn't been in years. Not as a muscle, not as a pattern on an EKG, but as a sound. An old sound, remembered in the body. She forced her attention back to the prompter. "In a few moments," she said, "you'll meet one of those lives, a cheetah who, thanks to your support, not only survived, but now helps us teach the next generation why these animals matter. If you're still with us, you're part of a remarkable community here at Whispering Hearts, where real stories of extraordinary animal connections come to life. Every subscriber helps us share more heart-touching moments that reveal the power of compassion across species. Don't forget to hit subscribe, because the journey ahead is one you'll feel long after the story ends." The floor manager in the black headset moved his hand in a small circle. "Stretch a little. New York was slow coming out of their ad break. The telethon was being simulcast across multiple feeds, and someone, somewhere, was late finishing a segment about coral reefs. Maya improvised effortlessly. "I've spent years reporting on human health," she said, deviating from the script by a sentence or two. "But what I've learned here in Southern Africa is that the line between human healing and animal survival is thinner than we think. Sometimes saving them saves something in us too." She heard a murmur of approval from the audience. She heard the faint buzz of the crowd on the far side of the arena. And then, under that, beneath the hum of light rigs and cameras and air conditioning, she heard something else. The faint rumble of a crate being rolled into position behind the curtain to her right. Her throat tightened. The prompter text blurred for half a second. She blinked hard and brought it back into focus. On the main control monitor, in a booth high above the floor, directors' boxes stacked up. Camera 1 on Maya, Camera 3 on the host desk, Camera 5 on the closed crate with the Sunjaro logo stenciled in green on its side. Tiny labels showed feed destinations: local, Site A, Sat B. A red countdown clock ticked towards 0. 30 seconds, the floor manager called softly. Backstage, the handler, a lean woman from the rescue center named Tandy, rested one hand on the crate. Through the vents, a pair of amber eyes were barely visible, reflecting the stage lights. The cheetah inside shifted once, then went still. "You're okay," Tandy murmured. "You've done this before." But this time was not like the others, and some part of her knew it. She had watched Cheetah pace every time an American voice came through the visitor center. Had seen him stop dead in front of recordings that sounded just a little too familiar. She had helped load him into the transport van in Namibia 3 days ago, and had watched him sniff the air like he was searching for something more than a new enclosure. On stage, the main host, a polished British conservation celebrity with perfect teeth, wrapped up a segment on rhino dehorning and tossed to Maya. And now, his voice flowed into the IFB in her ear. "We go to Johannesburg, where our very own health correspondent, Maya Collins, has been spending time with some remarkable animals and the people who care for them." Maya? Her camera's tally light went solid red. Around the world, picture-in-picture boxes slid to reveal her face, composed and open. The image beamed into living rooms, phones, and laptop screens. "Thank you, Daniel," she said. "I'm here on the side stage with a very special guest from the Sunjaro Wildlife Rescue Center. He's part of an ambassador program that brings the story of cheetah conservation to schools and communities across the region. And tonight, he's here to meet all of you." She felt the script in her mouth like someone else's words. She heard herself continue, explaining how cheetahs were Africa's most endangered big cat, how habitat loss and snares and bushmeat traps were driving their numbers down. Her voice found its rhythm, the one she used in exam rooms and TV spots when she needed people to listen and not panic. "He was found as a tiny cub," she said, "at a moment when his chances of survival were almost 0. But thanks to the work of the team at Sunjaro and support from viewers like you, he's alive, he's thriving, and he's ready to say hello." As she said it, a stagehand gave Tandy the cue. The crate door opened with a soft metal click. The cheetah stepped out, lean and long, his coat a perfect scatter of black spots on tawny gold. A specialized harness circled his chest, not a circus leash, more like the kind used for large dogs, but everything about his body language was wrong for a pet. He moved with the effortless precision of a wild thing. For a moment, it was like every other ambassador segment she had ever seen. Cheetah walked beside Tandy, head high, tail loose, muscles rippling under his fur. The audience gasped softly, a collective intake of breath at the sheer beauty of him. Cameras 3 and 4 caught his approach from different angles, switching back and forth in the control room, assembling the perfect television moment. Maya forced herself to look at him as if he were any cheetah. She catalogued the details like a clinician. Weight distribution, gait, respiratory rate. She refused to let her eyes linger on the line of his forehead, the exact pattern of spots along his cheeks, the faint scar on his shoulder just above where a scab had once been on a cub's fragile skin. "He's perfectly calm," Daniel said in her ear, narrating from the host desk. "Such a beautiful animal." And then Cheetah stopped. It was small at first. His front paw hung in the air a heartbeat longer than it should have. His ears tilted, not back in fear, but forward in intense focus. The fine whiskers on his muzzle twitched. He turned his head toward Maya. The handler's grip on the harness tightened automatically. The cameraman adjusted, framing the cheetah's face in a close-up that would look to viewers at home like simple curiosity. Only those on stage could feel the shift, the way the air seemed to thin, the way the temperature of the room changed by a few imperceptible degrees. Cheetah's eyes locked onto hers. Sound receded. The telethon, the crowd, the host's practiced patter, the subtle hum of the AC units, all of it faded. There was only the question in that gaze, and the faint tremor that started in Maya's hands and moved up her arms into her chest. He made a sound then. Not a growl, not a hiss, not the low rumble of a big cat warning or claiming territory. It was a high, bright chirp, impossibly out of place in the steel and glass world of the studio, picked up by the overhead mics and sent out over satellite. Someone in the audience laughed nervously, thinking it was cute. On the main monitor, the sound engineer's eyebrows shot up as the waveform spiked in a way he hadn't seen in any rehearsal. Maya knew that sound. She had heard it in the dark, with sand rattling against tin roofs and the power gone out, with a fragile weight trembling on her chest and a small, damp nose pressed into the hollow of her throat. Her mouth went dry. Her script vanished. "Cheetah," she whispered. Nobody in the arena understood why a woman whose job was to stay composed on television had just lost all the air in her lungs over a single word. Nobody, except the cheetah in the harness. He surged forward. The handler's hand slipped. The harness strap jerked through her fingers, burning skin, and then he was free, crossing the last few yards between them in 3 long, soundless bounds. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. Security took half a step toward the stage and froze, waiting for orders that didn't come. On the broadcast, the camera swung wildly, caught half a frame of motion, then settled just in time to capture one impossible image. A full-grown cheetah colliding gently, deliberately, with the woman on stage, pressing his head into her chest as if trying to crawl inside her rib cage. The mics caught the sound again. Not a threat. A desperate, joyful, pleading series of chirps pouring out of him as though 5 years of silence had burst in a single second. Maya's hands came up of their own accord, fingers tangling in fur whose pattern she could have traced blindfolded. Her eyes were already wet when she closed them. Around the world, millions of people watched and had no idea why this animal had chosen her, why this professional woman had suddenly stopped being a presenter and become something else entirely. Someone reunited with a part of herself she had left behind on another continent. To understand that, to understand why a dying cub had once learned her heartbeat, and why, 5 years later, he could find her again through light and noise and distance. We have to go back. Back to the night when a radio call at 3 in the morning pulled a burned-out nurse into the kind of emergency no medical school had ever prepared her for. Before the telethon lights, before the cameras and the impossible reunion that froze a global audience, there was a different kind of brightness in Maya Collins's life. A harsh, fluorescent glare that washed out color and mercy. The emergency room at St. David's Medical Center in Austin always smelled faintly of antiseptic and fur, a scent that clung to clothes long after a shift ended. For 5 years, Maya had moved through those halls with the brisk certainty of someone who knew how to steady a pulse, how to stop a hemorrhage, how to pull people back from the edge. Until the night she couldn't. The boy arrived just after dusk, strapped to a gurney, a paramedic shouting vital signs that were dropping too fast. He was 12, maybe 13, hit by a driver who never stopped. Maya's hands worked on instinct. Compressions, medications, commands to the team, but nothing held. The boy's chest shuddered once, twice, then simply stopped fighting. When the attending physician called time of death, Maya's hands were still shaking. She stood frozen long after the room had emptied, staring at the imprint his small body had left on the sheets. She heard the mother's scream from the hallway. For weeks afterward, she carried that sound like a bruise under her ribs. She saw the boy's face when she closed her eyes. She heard sirens even when the street outside was silent. Her supervisor recommended she take a few days off. Those days stretched into a week, then 2. When she returned, the ER alarms felt sharper, crueler, each one a reminder of the boy she hadn't saved. By the 3rd panic attack, in the supply room, sitting against the wall with a tray of syringes rattling beside her, she knew she couldn't stay. Her father's heart condition had been worsening too. Her mother's voice, thin with worry, had been leaving voicemails. "Honey, can you come home this weekend? Maybe help us talk to the cardiologist." And then, more quietly, "He misses you." Maya missed them too. But she couldn't bear to sit in another hospital, even as a visitor, and watch monitors blink out hope in neon green lines. One night, long after midnight, she sat at her tiny apartment's kitchen table with her laptop open. She meant to search flights home. Maybe consider taking a nursing contract somewhere quieter. Instead, her fingers drifted, almost subconsciously, to a link shared by a colleague. Volunteer medical support needed. Sanjaro Wildlife Rescue Center, Namibia. She clicked. The website wasn't flashy. Just sun-baked photos of cheetahs, antelopes, and exhausted-looking staff. They needed hands, the listing said. People with medical experience. People who could stay at least 6 weeks. Housing provided. Heat, dust, long hours, unpredictable emergencies. "This isn't healing work," her colleague had warned when passing the link. "It's field triage for animals. Brutal stuff. You'd hate it." But as Maya scrolled through photos of orphaned hyenas, snared wild dogs, and cheetahs with haunted eyes, something unlocked inside her. A strange sensation, like a door opening in a house she didn't know she'd been living in. At 3 in the morning, she filled out the volunteer application. At 6, she sent her supervisor a resignation email. By evening, she had bought a one-way ticket. 2 weeks later, Maya stepped off a small plane into the dry Namibian heat, which wrapped around her with a smell like dust, sunlight, and something older than grief. The Sanjaro Wildlife Rescue Center sat on the edge of a vast, semi-desert plain, its cluster of buildings half hidden by acacia trees. Everything felt stripped down and essential. The solar panels, the metal water tanks, the low enclosures blending into the sand. The air buzzed, not with sirens but with insects, the rustling of grass, and something that felt like breath itself. She barely had time to take it in before meeting Jonas. Lean, sun-browned, wearing boots that looked older than she was. He nodded once, lifted her duffel as if it weighed nothing, and said, "You're late. First feeding in 10 minutes. Follow me." Inside the main treatment building, chaos met her. Injured animals in crates, IVs improvised from spare tubing, veterinary interns moving like over-caffeinated ghosts. And at the center of it all stood Dr. Lindiwe Kumalo, the woman the emails had described as the spine of this operation. Lindiwe looked up once, eyes sharp behind her smudged glasses, and jerked her head toward a sink. "Wash. You're assisting on a kudu calf with respiratory distress. If you faint, faint outside." It wasn't a warm welcome, but it was enough. Maya scrubbed in. For the next week, she barely slept. She learned how to irrigate wounds filled with sand, how to calm an antelope whose entire body was built for flight, how to wrap a cheetah's paw without losing her fingers. She learned, too, that grief in wild animals had a different sound, quieter but deeper. Some nights, the cries from the enclosures seemed to rise into the stars, but she kept moving, kept working. For the first time in months, she wasn't haunted by sirens. Here, life and death were raw and unscripted, unbuffered by hospital walls. She felt both smaller and sharper, like a blade finally honed. 8 days in, the call came. It was 3:07 a.m. Maya was in the staff dormitory, lying in the dark, staring at a ceiling fan clicking unevenly. Then the radio crackled to life outside her door. Jonas's voice, low but urgent. Team 2 found a cheetah snared. Possible cubs. We need medical on site now. Maya's feet hit the floor before she even formed a thought. Minutes later, she was squeezed into the back of a dusty pickup truck beside Lindaway, who sorted equipment with a grim efficiency that told Maya this wasn't another routine emergency. The headlights carved pale tunnels through the grass as Jonas drove, the truck rattling over ridges and old termite mounds. "How far?" Maya asked. 20 minutes, Jonas said. "Maybe 30. They said the mother is still alive." "And the cubs?" she pressed. No one answered. The night felt enormous around them. The stars were so sharp they looked like they could cut skin. Maya gripped the edge of the seat, her pulse loud in her ears, louder than any siren she had run from in Texas. When they arrived, the scene was half shadow, half nightmare. Flashlights bobbed through tall grass. Rangers knelt around something on the ground. The air smelled of blood and rust. The cheetah lay on her side, panting, her belly heaving. The snare had cut deep into her hind leg, too deep. And at her stomach, pressed close to her ribs, were 2 tiny cubs, one barely moving, the other frantically butting its head into her fur, chirping weakly. Maya froze. She had seen dying people. She had held their hands, whispered comfort, watched life slip away. But this mother who wouldn't stop trying to curl her body around her cubs despite her pain, cut her in a place no ER trauma ever had. "Move," Lindaway said, already kneeling. "We work now. Feel later." The next 20 minutes unfolded in a blur of heat and blood and adrenaline. Maya held IV lines, kept fluids running, whispered nonsense to a creature who couldn't understand but somehow seemed to listen. They stabilized one cub. The other slipped away before they could even lift it. The mother held on longer, but not long enough. When her body finally stilled, the surviving cub let out a sound that split the night, a desperate, piercing chirp. It burrowed into her fur, refusing every human hand that reached for it. But it wouldn't survive out here. Not with predators nearby, not with the cold creeping in. "Jonas," Lindaway said softly. "We take them in. Now." As the rangers gently lifted the mother's body into the truck bed, the remaining cub bolted from every touch. Except one. When Maya knelt beside it, her voice low, her hand open, it paused. Its tiny chest trembled. It chirped once, confused, and then, impossibly, it crawled into her hands. The weight of it, barely 3 pounds, shaking with fear, sent something through her that nearly buckled her. That was the moment, though she couldn't know it yet, when her heartbeat became a map a dying cub would learn by memory. And when, thousands of miles away and 5 years later, a full-grown cheetah would hear her voice again through the static and lights of live TV and come running. The drive back to the rescue center felt longer than it had on the way out, though the wheels hit the same ruts and rocks on the same narrow track. The sky was still black, the stars still sharp as pins, but something in the air had changed with the mother cheetah's final breath. Even the wind felt different, lower, heavier, as though the land itself understood what had been lost. Maya sat in the back of the truck, cradling the lone surviving cub against her chest. Its fur was rough with dried blood and dust, its tiny body trembling in uneven shivers. Every few seconds it let out a soft chirp, a sound so thin it might have been swallowed by the night if Maya hadn't felt it vibrate against her skin. She murmured something soothing, words she didn't remember choosing, in the same slow rhythm she used to calm panicked patients. But this wasn't panic. It was grief, raw and uncomprehending. Up front, Jonas drove in silence, hands rigid on the wheel. Beside him, Dr. Lindewe stared out the window, her profile stern and unreadable. Only once did she speak, her voice low enough that Maya had to lean forward to hear. She held on longer than she should have, Lindewe said. A mother's body will do that. Refuse to give up while her young are still alive. Maya swallowed hard. We did everything we could. Yes, Lindewe said, but there was no relief in it. Just fact, delivered the way she might read out a dosage or a diagnosis. And now we do what we can for the one she left behind. The cub shifted, pressing its head into the hollow of Maya's throat with a soft squeak. It felt like a question it didn't know how to ask. When the truck rumbled past the outer gates of Sanjaro, dawn was beginning to gather at the horizon. Pale light spilled across the enclosures and shimmered along the roofs of the treatment buildings. The world was waking, but the weight of the night clung stubbornly to Maya's chest. Inside the main clinic, the staff snapped into action. Heat lamps flicked on. IV bags were hung. Sterile trays were laid out. But even in that flurry of controlled chaos, something faltered when Maya gently set the cub on the exam table. It was barely moving now. Its breaths came shallow and fast. Maya felt its ribs flutter under her fingertips. Too fragile, too frantic. Lindewe immediately began her exam, hands moving with the precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times. She checked hydration status, heart rate, reflexes, and finally stepped back with a long exhale. This one was born weak, she said. Too small for its age. The mother was malnourished even before the snare. Cub mortality is high, even in good years. So you're saying Maya couldn't finish? I'm saying its chances are low, Lindewe replied, not unkindly. But not zero. If it eats, if it warms up, if it bonds with a caregiver. Maya nodded, but her throat had gone tight. If it bonds. She'd seen the cub bolt from multiple hands in the field. She'd seen the way it had clung to its mother's cooling body, making the sound that had burrowed into her ribs and stayed there. Who will take the night shifts? One of the interns asked. Me? Maya said before she knew she was speaking. Lindewe looked at her, eyebrows raised. You're trained, yes. But this is specialized work. It requires... I can learn, Maya said, her voice firmer than she felt. You said it yourself. The cub needs someone consistent. I'm here. I'm awake. I can do it. Jonas leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. You're volunteering for a long haul, Collins. It's not like bottle feeding a kitten. I know. She didn't, not really. But she knew she couldn't walk away. Lindewe studied her for a long moment. We'll try, but you must understand, this might be for nothing. Maya nodded again, though something in her chest whispered, no, not this time. Not again. The treatment room hummed with activity as they prepared a heated nest box and mixed a formula that mimicked cheetah milk. The cub was too young to lap from a bowl, so they sterilized a small bottle with a narrow rubber nipple. It looked impossibly inadequate against the enormous task of keeping a life from slipping away. When everything was ready, Maya lifted the cub from the table. It whimpered once, then curled its paws inward, tiny claws catching on her shirt. She brought the bottle close to its mouth. The cub turned its head away. Come on, she whispered. Please. Lindewe stood by, arms folded. Newborns often refuse at first. They're expecting their mother's scent, her warmth. "I'm trying to keep it warm," Maya said. She tucked the cub closer, pulled the blanket around them both. It made no difference. Minutes passed, then 10. The cub's breathing grew more erratic. Its limbs twitched weakly. "Maya," Lindiwe said softly, "if it doesn't eat soon..." She didn't finish. Maya's pulse hammered. She lifted the cub higher, let it feel her breath on its fur. Nothing. Its mouth stayed stubbornly shut. Then a tremor ran through its body, and its head lolled slightly. "No," Maya breathed. No, stay with me." She remembered a night in Austin. The boy, the silence, the machine that flatlined, despite everything she did. She remembered standing in a supply closet afterward, gasping for air, telling herself she'd done all she could. She looked at this cub, at its frail chest rising too fast, at the desperation stitched into every trembling heartbeat. Not this one. Not tonight. Without thinking, she stood, moved to the cot in the corner of the treatment room, and lay down. She placed the cub directly on her chest, under her chin, where it could feel the warmth of her breath and the steady thrum of her heart. The cub stirred. "Come on," she whispered, lifting the bottle again. This time, the cub's nose twitched. It pressed it hesitantly against her shirt collar, then against her neck. Maya felt its whiskers brush her skin. Tentative, searching. Slowly, the cub opened its mouth. The first latch was weak, barely more than a graze, but then it latched again, firmer this time, and began to suck. Its tiny body tensed with effort. Milk dribbled from the corner of its mouth. Maya exhaled shakily, a sound halfway to a sob. "There you go," she whispered. That's it. Lindiwe said nothing for a long moment, watching with an expression Maya had never seen on her before. Something softer, almost reverent. "In all my years," the vet said quietly, "I've seen only a few cubs imprint this fast. It knows your voice, your heartbeat. For it, that is, mother." Maya felt something shift inside her, a crack in the shell she'd built since the night she lost the boy. Something warm and frightening leaked through. She held the cub until it finished the bottle, then until its breathing slowed into small, steady sighs. The tiny head rested directly beneath her chin, where her own heartbeat hummed. Jonas stepped closer, looking down at her with a half-smile. "Looks like you've been chosen." Maya brushed a thumb over the cub's fur. "What's his name?" "Cheetah," Jonas said. "It means precious." The name fit. As the sun climbed over the plains outside, painting the sky with soft gold, Maya closed her eyes briefly and felt, for the first time in a long time, that something had chosen to live. And whether she knew it or not, a bond had begun that would tear her heart apart, stitch it back together, and eventually pull a full-grown cheetah across a studio floor toward her 5 years later, live on television, as if no time had passed at all. For the first few days, Maya lived in a haze of sleepless nights and anxious mornings. Sanjaro's clinic operated at a constant hum, monitors beeping, radios crackling, interns hurrying in and out. But the cot in the corner of the nursery became a world of its own. It was where Cheetah slept, breathed, whimpered, and fought his way back into life. And it was where Maya learned just how fragile a creature could be and still choose to hold on. Cheetah woke every 3 hours, sometimes more. Hunger would jolt his tiny body awake, and the chirps, sharp, insistent, heartbreakingly vulnerable, would echo through the small room until Maya lifted him back against her chest. Each feeding was a battle until he could feel the rise and fall of her breathing beneath him. Only then would he latch on to the bottle. Only then would his tiny paws relax instead of pushing helplessly at the air. The staff noticed. "You've become the metronome he lives by." Jonas, remarked one morning as Maya sat cross-legged on the cot. Cheetah sprawled on her chest like a small spotted furnace, purring in soft fits. He hears you breathing, and it tells him the world isn't done with him yet. Maya smiled, though exhaustion tugged at the corners of her mouth. He's the one telling me that. Lindiwe entered then, clipboard in hand, eyes sweeping the room with her usual no-nonsense efficiency. But when she looked at the way Cheetah stretched his neck upward to rest his cheek directly over Maya's heartbeat, something in her expression softened. "He's imprinting," she said simply. "I know. You mentioned that before." "No." Lindiwe stepped closer, her tone shifting. "I mean, he is imprinting deeply, more deeply than most cubs do. Mother-young bonds in cheetahs are intense by nature, but with orphans it can become singular." Maya looked down at the small body curled over her heart. "And that's bad?" "It can be," Lindiwe admitted. "If the caregiver leaves too abruptly. If the bond is broken before the cub learns how to cope, he won't understand. They never do." Maya swallowed. "But it's better than him dying." "Yes," Lindiwe said. "It is." That was the end of the conversation. But the warning seeped into Maya's bones, lingering in the corners of her thoughts, even as exhaustion pulled her under again and again. Cheetah grew stronger in small, triumphant steps. His eyes brightened. His legs steadied. His chirps grew louder, sharper when he was hungry, softer when he was seeking Maya by sound alone. Sometimes he pressed his tiny paw against her throat, kneading gently, as if reassuring himself that she was still warm. When the first storm of the season rolled over Sonjaro, the power flickered twice, then died completely. The nursery lights sputtered and went black. Maya felt the sudden chill like a phantom crawling across the floor. "Oh no," she whispered, instinctively pulling Cheetah closer. It was well after midnight. Staff scrambled down hallways, their flashlights bobbing like scattered stars. In the nursery, Maya clicked hers on and tucked it beside her on the cot. The wind howled outside, and the roof trembled as sand carried by the storm scratched against the tin in harsh, frantic bursts. Cheetah trembled too. His heartbeat spiked under her hand. He tried to curl into the blanket, chirping erratically, high, panicked, confused. His little body wasn't strong enough to regulate its temperature for long without help. "I've got you," Maya murmured, pulling the blanket tighter. "Stay with me. I won't let the dark take you." She lay back again, placing him in the same spot he had clung to since the night he first fed. A small, warm weight pressed over her heart. She kept the bottle ready in one hand and stroked the fur on his spine with the other, rhythmically, gently, until his breathing began to slow. He found her pulse. She felt the shift, his body relaxing, his head settling, his frantic chirps fading into faint, steady vibrations. His heartbeat aligned with hers like a second rhythm underneath her own. That moment, under the roar of wind and the pulse of sand against the walls, bound them in a way nothing else could have. Later, when the storm passed and the generator kicked back on, Lindiwe entered the nursery to find Maya sitting upright, Cheetah asleep on her chest, a nearly empty bottle on the floor. "You saved him," she said quietly. "I just held him." That was enough. Lindiwe's voice softened. "Make no mistake, this cub would not have survived another night without you." For the first time in months, Maya felt something inside her unclench. She'd spent so long haunted by the child she hadn't saved in Austin, the face she couldn't forget, the silence that followed. But now, here, a small life breathed because of her heartbeat, because she had stayed awake, because she hadn't looked away, and the strange, heavy thought came to her. Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I just needed someone smaller than me to believe it first. Over the next weeks, Cheetah's world expanded. First the nursery, then the small fenced play area outside, where he wobbled unsteadily at first, then began to run in short bursts, his back legs sometimes outrunning the front ones, leaving him tumbling into the sand with surprised chirps. Every fall ended the same way. He'd bolt back to Maya, launching himself into her lap or pressing his head into her ribs. "You're his compass," Jonas said one afternoon, leaning on the fence. "Wherever you sit, that's north." "Should I be worried?" Maya joked. Jonas shrugged. "Depends. Are you planning to go somewhere?" She hesitated. "Jonas," he cut her off gently. "I'm not asking for an answer. Just remember, every animal here loses something before we can save them. Cheetah lost nearly everything. Just be certain about what you give him and what you take with you if you ever leave." Maya didn't respond. She sat in the sand, letting Cheetah climb her leg, his tiny claws catching on her shirt as he tried to scramble up to her shoulders. He chirped in triumph when he reached her, then curled under her chin, purring so loudly she felt it through her bones. Leaving? The idea hurt more than she expected, but reality had a way of intruding on even the most fragile sanctuary. One evening, as she sat feeding Cheetah, her phone buzzed with a faint vibration she almost didn't notice. When she glanced at the screen, her stomach dropped. "Call me. Dad's heart isn't doing well." Mom Cheetah paused mid-suckle and looked up at her with wide amber eyes, milk dripping from the corner of his mouth. He chirped softly, sensing something in her posture. Maya stroked his cheek, trying to steady her breathing. "Not now," she whispered. "Please, not now." But life didn't care about timing. It never had. Neither grief nor love waited for anyone to be ready. In the quiet room, with Cheetah's heartbeat pressed against hers, Maya understood that the bond between them was growing into something she might not be able to walk away from. But her past and her family were starting to reach for her again. She just didn't know yet that every choice she made from this moment on would pull her closer to the day when Cheetah would run to her across another room. This time under blinding studio lights, in front of millions, because the map he carried in his chest had never forgotten the sound of her heart. By Cheetah's 7th week, the little cub had transformed from a trembling creature clinging desperately to life into a spirited, wide-eyed streak of spotted mischief. He ran lopsided circles around Maya's legs, tripping over his own paws. He pounced on her shoelaces. He chirped indignantly whenever she tried to leave the nursery for more than a few minutes. His legs grew steadier, his eyes brighter, his trust deeper. But no amount of progress erased the truth waiting outside Sonjiro's dusty gates. Maya still had a life thousands of miles away, and that life was beginning to claw its way back toward her just as surely and just as stubbornly as Cheetah climbed into her lap after every fall. Her mother called again, then again, each voicemail a little tighter, a little more tired. "He's short of breath more often. The doctor wants more tests. Honey, we need you here." Maya listened to every message in the dim light of the nursery, her hand resting instinctively on the warm body curled over her heart. Each time, guilt tugged at her, but Cheetah would lift his head and chirp softly, checking on her, asking without words if she was still present. She didn't answer her mother. Not yet. She couldn't. The break came when a group of visitors arrived at Sanjaro, an international film crew contracted by a conservation network in the US. They were scheduled to film a multi-episode series on African wildlife rescue operations. Their lead producer, Owen Parker, was charismatic and loud in the way men who grew up working in television often were. He wore sunglasses even indoors and had a handshake that felt like a business deal. "We're looking for stories that move people," he announced during the team briefing, pacing as if the dusty treatment room were a studio stage. "Not just facts and footage, something with emotional weight, something that will pull heartstrings." Jonas muttered under his breath, "Then maybe stop stepping on people's hearts." But Owen didn't hear, or pretended not to. His attention snapped to the nursery window where Cheetah was perched on Maya's lap, pawing at her braid like it was the greatest toy ever invented. "And that, ladies and gentlemen," Owen declared, pointing, "is a star." Maya stiffened. "He's not a star. He's a cub recovering from trauma." Owen grinned. That's exactly why he's compelling. Viewers will fall in love with him instantly. And with you. His head tilted, calculating. What did you say your name was? Maya Collins? You're American. You speak clearly. You're comfortable with medical detail. You're the whole package. This story, your story with that cub, could anchor the entire series. He's not a prop, Maya said sharply. No one said he was. Owen spread his hands. But if millions of people see him, millions will care about what happens to cheetahs. Isn't that the point of being here? Saving more than just one. The words stung because part of her knew they were true. Cheetah was healing, but thousands of other animals across the region weren't. A platform could change that. It could bring funding, volunteers, awareness. Still, Maya's stomach turned. I won't let cameras distress him, she said. Of course not, Owen replied, too quickly. But she didn't trust the glint in his eyes. 2 days later, the crew returned with equipment. Soft boxes, LED panels, reflective shields that caught the sun and threw it in sharp angles across the enclosure. Cheetah, who had never feared anything in Maya's presence, suddenly froze. His body tensed, his tail tucked. Then he bolted toward Maya, launching into her chest with a force that startled even her. His claws snagged her shirt, his heart hammered wildly against her ribs. The distress rolled off him in waves. Back off with the lights, Maya snapped. The interns scrambled to dim them, but Cheetah remained rigid, clinging to her like a creature who believed the world was about to collapse. Owen approached, holding the camera high. This is good, he whispered. It shows the bond. Maya whipped around so fast that he actually stepped back. You film him like this, and I swear I'll walk. Owen blinked, caught off guard. Hey now, Maya. He's terrified. And if you can't see that, you have no business filming wild animals. Something in Owen's expression cooled. The showman facade slid away, replaced with something harder. We're offering an opportunity, he said quietly. The chance for millions of viewers to care. The chance to help this center stay open. You walk away from that. You'd better have a good reason. Maya almost said, I'm protecting him. But she stopped. She had been doing that so often, protecting Cheetah, shielding him, giving him every piece of her heart she still trusted. But her heart didn't belong entirely here. It was still tethered to Texas, to her mother's worried voice, to a father waiting for scans and specialists. That night, after the crew left, Maya sat on the nursery floor. Cheetah lay sprawled across her chest again, breathing deep and slow. His body was heavier now, his spine longer, his paws larger with each passing week. He kneaded the fabric of her shirt, like he always did before falling asleep. She looked at his face, those amber eyes that had once opened to see only death and had instead found her, and whispered, What am I going to do with you? He chirped softly, as if he understood. And then her phone buzzed. The screen showed a single text from her mother. It's time, honey. Please come home. Maya's throat closed. She looked down at Cheetah. He opened one sleepy eye and gave a small, questioning chirp, the same sound he made when she returned after stepping outside for a minute. You have no idea, she whispered, running her thumb along his cheek. How could you? Later, she told Lindewy and Jonas what was happening. Jonas looked away, jaw tight. Lindewy rested a firm hand on her shoulder. You must go, she said. Your father needs you. And Cheetah, Maya whispered. Lindewy hesitated, which said more than words. Leaving now, she said carefully. We'll break something in him, but staying, it might break something in you. Maya felt her breath shake. Isn't there a way to keep both intact? There never is, Lindewy said gently. Not in rescue work. That night, Maya stayed in the nursery, alone. Cheetah climbed onto her chest with the certainty of a creature who had no doubt where he belonged. He pressed his small head under her chin, purring, trusting. She talked to him for hours about Texas, about her father, about the life she had once lived, about the fear that she was about to tear something precious apart. When dawn finally began to seep through the window, she whispered the words she didn't want to say, "I have to go, just for a little while." Cheetah didn't understand, but he sensed the tremor in her voice. He pressed closer, chirping in small, pleading bursts. Maya held him tight. Just after sunrise, while Cheetah was still asleep on her chest, she lifted him gently, set him on the blanket, and forced herself to stand. She didn't look back. If she did, she would never make it out the door. When she reached the jeep, Jonas stood waiting. He studied her face, then murmured, "Someday, the desert calls back what it's given, and when it does, you'll return." Maya didn't answer. She just nodded, climbed into the jeep, and let the engine carry her away. Behind her, in the quiet nursery, a cub awoke to find the heartbeat he trusted most had vanished, and he cried for her until his voice went hoarse. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was only the first time she would walk away from him, and the only time he would ever accept it without running after her. When Maya's plane touched down in Austin, the humidity hit her first, the thick, warm air that felt nothing like the dry winds of Sunjaro. Her mother stood at the gate, eyes red, holding a jacket Maya had left behind in her old apartment years earlier. They hugged tightly, the kind of embrace that tries to make up for time lost and time afraid. Her father was weaker than she expected. The man who once fixed fences, chopped firewood, and teased her about her had big city nerves. Now tired walking from the bedroom to the couch, but he still had his old smile, the one that lifted one corner of his mouth like he knew a secret nobody else did. "You came home," he whispered, patting her hand with fingers that trembled far more than they used to. "That's all I needed." She tried to settle back into her former life, accompanying her father to appointments, helping her mother cook, fixing the roof shingles that had blown off during the last storm. She even returned to her old volunteer position at the wildlife rehab center in town. But no matter how many baby possums she fed or how many injured hawks she wrapped in blankets, the ache remained. It was quiet, constant, and shaped like a tiny heartbeat she could still feel if she pressed her palm to her chest long enough. Cheetah. Weeks passed, then months. Her father's condition stabilized, declining slowly but not dangerously. But the weight inside Maya did not ease. It grew heavier as she went on living a life that no longer fit her. One evening, she found herself standing outside her childhood home, staring at the wide Texas sky. Crickets buzzed, a sprinkle of stars glimmered, but she didn't feel grounded, she felt lost. Inside the house, her phone buzzed. She didn't hear it immediately, but when she did, her breath caught. An email from Sunjaro, from Jonas. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Maya, Cheetah is healthy, strong, fast. He plays harder than the others and runs circles around all of us. But when Americans visit, he reacts. He paces. Looks at the women first, then listens for sounds outside the enclosure. It's like he's searching for something we cannot give him. I'm telling you this not to hurt you, but because you deserve to know. He has not forgotten the rhythm he learned from your heartbeat. You carry it too. You always will." She sat down slowly, letting the words settle into her in a way nothing had for months. He remembers. But she couldn't go back yet. Not when her father still needed her. Not when her mother depended on her to hold the fragile structure of their family in place. So Maya stayed, and the years rolled on. Cheetah grew into adulthood, his body lengthening into the elegant, powerful shape of a full-grown cheetah. The sanctuary updated her periodically through videos and photos. Cheetah sprinting across a field, Cheetah wrestling a rope toy, Cheetah perched on a rock watching the horizon. In every photo, his eyes had the same color as the sunlit dust of Sunjaro. But the emails always included one line, sometimes from Jonas, sometimes from Lindywe. He still listens for you. Meanwhile, Maya's world changed shape around her. Her father's health stabilized enough for him to return to small projects. Her mother grew stronger too, less fearful, more hopeful. And Maya, she tried. She worked short-term contract jobs. She saved money. She dated a man from her volunteer center for a while. A kind, quiet wildlife photographer named Dean. He brought her coffee on long clinic days and laughed easily, the kind of man anyone could love. But after 8 months, he asked softly, "Who has your heart, Maya? Because I don't think it's me." She said nothing. He nodded gently. "It's okay. I hope whoever he is, he comes back." She broke things off the next day. That night she dreamed, not of Texas, not of her parents, not even of the life she'd tried to rebuild, but of a narrow nursery room lit by a flickering lamp. A small cub pressed to her chest, a soft chirp against her throat. She woke up gasping. The next morning she made a decision. She applied for an international wildlife correspondent program she had seen advertised, a position based in Denver but focused on endangered species around the world. A job she once would have been terrified to apply for. She received an acceptance email 3 weeks later. "You're going back," her mother said quietly when she saw the look on Maya's face. Maya nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "Dad's stable now. You've taken care of us long enough," her mother said, touching her cheek. "But that place, those people, that little creature, they took care of you too. We'd be selfish to keep you." Maya hugged her tightly, her breath trembling. "I don't know if he'll remember me," she whispered. "Oh, honey," her mother said. "You don't look at someone the way you talk about him unless part of you knows he will." 2 months later, she boarded a plane to Denver. From there, she would cover environmental crises, conservation work, and wildlife rescues across the globe. It was everything she had once dreamed of: purpose, impact, the chance to tell stories that mattered. But after a year in the new position, something inside her still felt unfinished. Her work took her to Asia, Europe, Central America, but never back to Africa. Never to Sunjaro. Then, almost exactly 5 years after she had left the sanctuary, her supervisor approached her with a proposal. Africa, a multi-part series on wildlife rehabilitation efforts. Interviews, field footage, sanctuary visits. You'd be our lead correspondent. Maya's heart stopped. Africa, the sanctuary, Quito. She tried to answer casually, but her voice cracked. "When do I leave?" 2 weeks. You're spearheading the project." That night, she sat on her balcony overlooking the Denver skyline, overwhelmed by the collision of fate and timing. She placed her hand over the place where Quito used to sleep, as if trying to summon a memory that bridged oceans. 5 years, she whispered. "Will you remember me at all?" There was no answer. But far across the world, across desert and savannah and shifting winds, a fully grown cheetah lifted his head in the moonlight, ears pricked, gaze fixed toward the horizon as if the air itself had changed. As if something familiar had brushed past his memory. As if a heartbeat he once learned had echoed again, faint, distant, but real. Because some bonds didn't fade. They waited. They endured. And now, after 5 years of silence, hers was calling him home. The air in Kenya felt warmer than Maya remembered, like the land itself breathed differently. When she stepped out of the small plane and onto the cracked runway, the heat wrapped around her in a way that made her pause. The smell of dust and grass, the distant hum of insects, the sweep of endless savannah. Every detail struck her with a force she wasn't prepared for. It felt like stepping back into a life she had lived in, another version of herself. The crew walked ahead of her, sound techs, camera operators, 2 field producers. But Maya lingered for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the landscape she once knew as intimately as her own pulse. The air tasted like memory. Over the next 2 weeks, she filmed conservation stories across several wildlife centers, elephant nurseries, rhino protection units, anti-poaching patrols. She worked professionally, gracefully, never letting the crew see how each mile brought her closer to Sunjaro, closer to the place she feared and longed for in equal measure. When she lay awake at night, staring at the mosquito net draped over her cot, she felt it in her chest, a quiet, persistent rhythm, a memory of tiny paws kneading against her heart, a chirp soft as a breath, a bond she had never shaken. But every time she thought about going to Sunjaro, fear slipped in like a shadow. What if he doesn't remember me? What if the photos were just that? Photos. What if I was a chapter he's long outgrown? By day 15, she still hadn't gone. That morning, she was reviewing footage when her phone vibrated. The name on the screen made her chest tighten instantly. Lindiwe and Lovu. She answered before the first ring fully sounded. "I heard you were in the country," Lindiwe said, her voice unchanged, steady, warm, edged with amused disapproval. "And you were planning to fly home without stopping here?" Maya closed her eyes. "I wasn't sure I should." There was a pause, a long one. Lindiwe was choosing her words carefully. "He didn't forget you." Maya opened her mouth, but no sound came. "When Americans visit," Lindiwe continued, "he paces the fence until his paws bleed. When he hears a woman's voice with the slightest US accent, he chirps until he loses strength. He searches faces. He listens for footsteps that never come. He has looked for you for 5 years." The breath left Maya's lungs in one long, shaking exhale. "Maya," Lindiwe said more softly, "come to the sanctuary. Please." She didn't remember ending the call. She only remembered grabbing her keys, telling the crew she needed one personal day, and driving west toward the desert. The closer she drew to Sunjaro, the more the earth shifted beneath her memories. She reached the familiar road, the one that curved around a shallow ravine, the one she had traveled the night she first held Cheetah in her arms. When the gates finally appeared, her hands tightened around the steering wheel. The sanctuary had grown, taller fencing, new shade structures, more staff cabins, but the heartbeat of the place felt the same. Jonas stood waiting outside the main office. When Maya stepped out of the vehicle, he didn't smile right away. He just looked at her, taking in the woman who had changed so much and not at all. "You came back," he said finally. "I wasn't sure I could," she whispered. He nodded once. "He's in the northern enclosure. We moved him there last year. More space, fewer visitors." Maya swallowed. "Does he know I'm here?" "No," Jonas said. "Not yet." Those 2 words, "not yet," made her knees weak. They began walking through the sanctuary grounds. Staff turned their heads, whispers spreading, voices soft with surprise and something like hope. A few of the older caretakers recognized her and smiled with the tenderness of people witnessing something they had always believed would happen. Finally, they reached the northern enclosure. It was wide, several acres of dry grass, scattered boulders, acacia shade. A single cheetah lay stretched out on a raised platform, his body powerful and sleek. His coat gleamed gold beneath the afternoon sun. Even from a distance, he was breathtaking. Cheetah. He was no longer the fragile cub she had carried against her heart. He was a fully grown predator, muscular, elegant, magnificent. But there was something familiar in the tilt of his head, in the long curve of his tail resting in the dust. Her breath caught. "He's beautiful," she whispered. Jonas's voice softened. "And he's yours more than he has ever been anyone else's." As if sensing their presence, Cheetah lifted his head slightly, but he didn't sit up or react beyond that. They were too far for him to distinguish details. Maya's stomach churned. "He looks content, like he's moved on." Jonas didn't answer immediately. He let the wind carry a beat of silence between them. "Call him," he said at last. Her throat tightened. I don't know if I can." "You have to," Jonas said gently. "For both of you." Maya stepped forward until her fingers rested lightly on the fence. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs. She inhaled, exhaled, and then she spoke. "Cheetah." Her voice cracked. Soft, fragile, uncertain. Nothing happened. She tried again, louder this time. "Cheetah." The cheetah's right ear twitched. Her breath hitched. Once more, she called, letting her voice soften into the tone she used when he was small, the one she had whispered into the nursery darkness night after night. "Cheetah, I'm here." This time, he lifted his head fully. His body tensed, not with fear, but with something sharper. His ears pitched forward, his eyes, amber and bright, locked on the fence. "Is he?" She whispered. "Keep calling." "Cheetah." He stood. The transformation was instant and breathtaking, a sudden shift from resting animal to electric recognition. His tail flicked once, then his legs moved, and then he was running, not loping, not trotting, running. Full speed, full force. Every muscle coiling and releasing with the precision of a creature born to outrun the wind. Maya stumbled backward as he closed the distance, and Cheetah slammed into the chain-link fence with a desperate, aching force, pressing his whole body against it, trying to push his face through to her. He chirped, loud, frantic, relentless, the same sound he used to make when he searched for her heartbeat in the dark. Maya's knees buckled. She dropped to the dirt, gripping the fence as Cheetah shoved his head against her hands, rubbing, chirping, purring so hard she felt the vibration through the metal. "He remembers," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Oh God, he remembers." Jonas turned away, brushing at his eyes. "We always knew he would." For 2 hours, Maya stayed kneeling, hands locked through the fence, while Cheetah pressed every part of himself as close to her as the world would allow. He had not forgotten. He had not moved on. He had been waiting. 5 years. 2 continents. A bond born in the quiet beat of a heartbeat shared under a nursery light. This reunion, this impossible, beautiful reunion, was only the beginning. Because neither of them knew it yet, but soon Cheetah would walk into a brightly lit studio, live on air in front of millions, and choose her again. 3 days after the reunion at the northern enclosure, Maya stood in the cool, dimly lit hallway of the Nairobi Broadcasting Tower, the hum of studio equipment vibrating faintly through the walls. She'd been in dozens of TV studios before, local Texas stations, crowded Denver newsrooms, polished national sets. But never had she walked into one with her pulse climbing like this, with her breath catching every few seconds as if her lungs couldn't quite expand. Today wasn't just a broadcast. Today was the moment everything in her life had been silently circling back toward. She checked her mic pack twice, adjusted her collar, smoothed her hair. None of it would matter when the cameras went live, she knew, because the second Cheetah entered the studio, professionalism would become a distant, irrelevant concept. All she could hope for was enough composure to speak. The crew shuffled around her, unaware of the storm twisting inside her chest. Only Linda, standing by the side door with a calm expression that didn't hide her excitement, understood. She would be handling Cheetah today. Grace, the handler most familiar with him, had fallen ill that morning. It felt like fate, quietly rearranging the pieces to make this moment unfold as it needed to. "You're ready?" Linda said quietly. "No," Maya whispered back with a nervous laugh. "But I'm here. That's enough," the studio manager signaled. Cameras were rolling in New York. 30 seconds until Maya's segment. Her heart pounded painfully. She took her place behind the sleek anchor desk, staring straight into the camera lens. This was safe. This was the world she understood. talking, reporting, informing, keeping her emotions tucked neatly behind her words. 10 seconds, someone called. Maya exhaled slowly. The red light blinked on. Joining us live from Nairobi is our international wildlife correspondent, Maya Collins, the anchor in New York said. Maya, tell us about the conservation program you've been covering these past 3 weeks. She smiled. Steady, clear, practiced. Thank you, Mark. Kenya's wildlife rehabilitation efforts are among the most impactful in the world, and today we're highlighting one of their ambassador programs, which helps educate the public about endangered species. Her voice sounded normal. That amazed her, because beneath her composed exterior, anticipation was unraveling every inch of calm she had left. Behind the camera, the side door eased open. Maya heard it. Quiet, careful, but unmistakable. She didn't turn, not yet. She needed to finish her line. And today, Dr. Lindiwe Ndlovu has brought one of their most remarkable ambassadors to... And then it happened. A sound that cut through the air like a memory wrapped in breath. A single, sharp chirp. Maya froze. The words vanished from her throat. Another chirp followed, higher, louder, filled with recognition so pure it vibrated through the room. She turned. Cheetah stood 15 feet away, tall and magnificent under the harsh blue lights. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His ears pitched forward. His amber eyes locked on her instantly, as if no time, no distance, not even the years themselves had dulled his map of her. The leash in Lindiwe's hand went slack. Cheetah chirped again, a sound so frantic it bordered on heartbreak. And then he moved, not with the cautious grace of an ambassador animal used to studio chaos, not with the wary steps of a wild creature entering unfamiliar terrain. He ran. The handlers startled. The cameraman cursed under his breath. A producer shouted something that no one heard. But Maya stayed frozen, breath caught halfway in her lungs as 140 pounds of spotted muscle barreled straight toward her. He didn't leap. He skidded to a stop inches from her legs, pressed the full weight of his body against her, and pushed his head into her stomach with a force that nearly knocked her backward. She dropped to her knees. Her hands found his cheeks, his fur, his shoulders, all of him trembling with the kind of relief only an animal who had waited 5 years could feel. "Oh God, Cheetah," she whispered, her voice breaking on the name. He chirped continuously, frantically, the sound echoing across the studio, through microphones, across satellites, onto screens in living rooms across America. Millions of viewers watched a cheetah nuzzle a human like a lost child return to their mother. Maya buried her face against his neck, tears falling freely, professionalism lost and irrelevant. Cheetah purred, deep, rumbling, shaking through her ribs, and nuzzled her hair, her hands, her shoulder, as if checking every inch of her to make sure she was real. The anchor in New York was speechless. The studio crew in Nairobi stood still, transfixed. The only sound was the purring. Lindiwe stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. For those watching, this is no ordinary animal behavior. This is recognition. This is memory. This is a bond formed when Cheetah was an orphaned cub and Maya became the only heartbeat he trusted. Maya lifted her head, trying to speak, but the moment swallowed every word she might have said. The anchor finally stammered. "Maya, are you all right?" She laughed through tears, resting her forehead gently on Cheetah's. "He remembered me. That's all that matters." Cheetah chirped again, softer now, as if echoing her words. They eventually managed to continue the segment. It ended up being one of the most watched live broadcasts in the network's history, shared, replayed, analyzed, celebrated. But for Maya, time inside that studio was measured only by the rhythm beneath her hands. The familiar vibration of Cheetah's purr, the same heartbeat that once lay tiny and fragile on her chest. When the cameras shut off, The crew cleared the studio while Maya sat cross-legged on the floor with Cheetah curled partly into her lap, partly draped protectively around her. Lindewi leaned against the wall, smiling quietly. "He was waiting for this," she said. "For you." Maya stroked Cheetah's cheek. "I left him." "And you came back," Lindewi replied. "Animals understand more than we give them credit for, and sometimes they forgive more too." Cheetah rolled onto his side, pressing his paw gently over Maya's hand, a gesture so familiar it made her heart crumble and rebuild at once. Later that evening, Lindewi guided Maya to a quiet wing of the sanctuary. She opened the door to a warm room filled with soft blankets, bottles, and two tiny shapes curled together. "Before you decide what comes next," she said, "you should see this." Two 8-week-old cheetah cubs blinked up at Maya, small, fuzzy, spotted. One stumbled to its feet and toddled toward her, sniffing the air with the innocent curiosity only babies possess. "They're Cheetos," Lindewi said. "Their mother didn't survive. They need someone who knows what it means to love a cub back to life." The little cub reached Maya's hand and pressed its head into her palm, instinctively, trustingly, just like Cheetah had. Maya sank to her knees. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. Lindewi smiled gently. "Whatever your heart tells you." And for the first time in years, Maya knew the answer before the question fully formed. Because some stories don't end where they break. They end where they begin again, with a heartbeat pressed against yours and a future you never thought you'd be brave enough to choose.